yesterday, the January 6th hearing dominated the news cycle. Scant mention of this crisis. I mean, it's not just the 51 people who are dead. It's also May being the absolute worst month in U.S. history when it comes to these migrant crossings and encounters. No one seems to care. I mean, I realize January 6th is a story, but it's also an old story. And I opened up the show today by saying even what we heard from Ms. Hutchison was largely just new color on old news. Did anybody think Trump was loyal to Pence on January 6th and was out there defending him and had his back, right? Was anybody shocked that he wanted to go to the Capitol? He said that explicitly in his speech. We knew he wanted to go to the Capitol. Is anybody surprised that Trump, concerned that his crowd size wasn't big enough on January 6th, said, let everybody in, weapons or no weapons? He wanted the shot to look good. Yes, it's callous, and understandably, it wasn't a good decision. But then there's no follow-up on, did the Secret Service stop using the magnetometers on people? I doubt it. Did they start letting people with the weapons in so Trump could have a good shot of his crowd? I doubt it. That was noticeably missing. But the media decides to melt down. This is it. We've got him. He's done. They've done it a million times. It's never true. And stories like this one about, Joe Biden's southern border, quote, unquote, policy totally collapsing and resulting in scores of deaths gets ignored.
Yeah, and another thing about January 6th, that hearing was unscheduled. They scheduled that at the last minute because they had this bombshell, supposedly, and this is a Democrat-run committee. So even the Republicans on there, and I know I know a lot of people aren't fans of Kinzinger or Cheney, but they are Republicans in name at least. They don't control when these hearings happen. So you had a Democrat-led committee that called a last-minute hearing. I think they were adjourned until mid-July. Because they're basically trying to, string this out as long as they can until the November elections. And I said this on my podcast yesterday, that it sure looked like it was a way to change the news cycle. They were kind of getting hammered on their Roe loss, which is the biggest Democratic Party loss in probably decades. It cannot be understated enough how, devastated they are over this. And I think that this was a way to change the news cycle back to something like January 6th. And, alluding to something that you said, I think I was the first person in all of what I guess you could call conservative media out of the gate with impeach and remove Trump over what happened on January 6th. And I'm kind of with you where I look at it and I say, okay, we have all of these things that Trump tried to do, and at every single place, either by his cabinet or by his attorneys or by judges or by state officials, he was stopped at every single way. And instead, we get overwrought monologues from, Jake Tapper, the last honest man in journalism, about how our democracy is hanging on by a thread. And as we saw the clip with Boris Johnson, he was kind of like, what are you talking about? This was, of course, it was a bad day. Congress was delayed from certifying results for 8 hours. Yes, people died. There were, police officers who that day have suffered trauma. And then we, of course, had Ashley Babbitt. But eventually they certified the vote, and it went on, and Joe Biden was sworn in, and here we are today. And so I look at it kind of how you said, we have all of these things where we're being told that he tried to do, but it didn't happen. And I kind of look at it and say, if it didn't happen, then what are we talking about? I do think this is a political investigation, and I contrast it with the Robert Mueller investigation. Robert Mueller wasn't on CNN every night. He wasn't, he didn't have guys leaking things. It was, he went to work to figure out, what was going on here, and in the end, he didn't find much, and they were disappointed with that also. And you compare it to this investigation where there's leaks happening all over the place. Everything that Adam Schiff magically ends up on CNN, and we get every journalist, and now you have kind of a new administration star who's going to be making the rounds on media and on The View. And already there's parts of her testimony that are being called into doubt. And, it's the old Twitter joke where they say, how is Trump going to slip out of this one? And Trump slips out of it, and they kind of just go, well, nevertheless, on to the next thing.
Right. In a way, it's, forgive me for the analogy, but it's kind of like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, where she gave her emotional testimony. And it's like, okay, I mean, I actually believed a lot of what she testified to and found her credible in some of the assertions. And then came the cross-examination, which just left her a withering puddle of contradictions and obvious lies. She lied repeatedly on the stand. And by the time that lawyer was done with her, I was saying, forget it. I don't believe a word she said. This is not a truth teller. And I need to reassess, my opinion of her, which I did. That second piece never happened for Ms. Hutchison. It hasn't happened for a single witness there. It's all set up to drive you to one conclusion. And I've said before, as a lawyer, I used to try cases. It would have been really easy to win every single one of them if I didn't have an opponent. If nobody ever cross-examined my witnesses or put my claims to the test or objected to any of my testimony. And yet still, Stephen, what we had yesterday was a media. I'll give you a couple of, here's a couple of highlights, right? Jonathan Karl, the testimony by Cassidy Hutchison makes it crystal clear. Donald Trump envisioned a full-blown coup on January 6th. David French, of course, the 25th Amendment should have been invoked within hours of January 6th. Chris Wallace, she was a great witness, absolutely precise. She was just brilliant. And, I opened the show today with, no offense to Miss Hutchison, she's a young person, and I'm sure she did the best she could. But like every single thing she testified to was, he said something to the effect of, it was something to the effect of, I remember very specifically he had said something to the effect of, well, which is it? What did he say? Where are your notes? You were a young woman. You're telling me there was one testimony where the White House counsel allegedly went to her and said, make sure Trump doesn't go from the rally to Capitol Hill. You got to make sure. I mean, you're telling me as a young 24 or 23-year-old woman, you wouldn't be home in your diary saying, holy shit, the White House counsel put it on me to make sure the president doesn't. Where's that? Yeah. Let's see that.
Yeah, and you know what? I do take issue with the fact that we'd never heard any of this for 2 years. We none of us had heard the name of Cassidy Hutchison unless you're in D.C. And I take an issue with people who accepted paychecks from this administration for years, and then suddenly now I've grown a conscience because it seems to me that I'm being promised things, or I have a media tour in front of me, or I can appear
like the woman on The View,
and I can rehab. And there, the people who, went to work for this administration and gladly accepted paychecks for years are kind of like a dime a dozen out of this. We have Miles Taylor from, who wrote supposedly the Anonymous, a New York Times op-ed. And, and you have, I think now you have some of Pence's comms people coming out, and they've discovered, as many kind of ex-conservative pundits have, that it's very warm under that dragon's wing. And I'm sure you're certainly not someone I have to explain that to, where it's like, okay, now I'm going to come out and it could be rehab, or I could have promises of a contributor gig or somewhere. All I have to do is say these stories. And, as someone who, I'm kind of attacked from both sides of both, the pro-Trump and the anti-Trump sphere. I look at it and say, I wrote on January 6th that they should impeach and remove him. And this is kind of my attitude with January 6th, where I'm fine examining Trump from that day. I'd like to know what he was doing for an hour and a half in the White House, while, Pence was forced to coordinate with Esper from the Department of Defense to get the National Guard in there to kind of clear all those yahoos out. But I'd also like to examine everything from that day. I'd like to examine why the Capitol was left, for the most part, with a skeleton police crew, why there was no defenses there, while they knew that there was going to be a large rally on the Mall. I'd like to examine why Pelosi didn't just draft impeachment articles on a napkin while hiding out in a bunker. They could have done that. Pelosi reportedly said, if you don't invoke the 25th Amendment, as David French said, I will impeach him. Well, that never happened. Neither of those things happened. And so I'd like to examine everything from that day, but we know that that's not really going to happen. And we largely know, like you said, how Trump felt because he gave a speech in front of everyone.
Yes, he said I'm going
to go to the Capitol with you, and then didn't. And I've always looked at it as he kind of, slinked off to the Oval Office, and he kind of went and he pouted. And, we all know all of that happened. And of course, we get the story yesterday of, Trump grabbing the wheel of this from the Secret Service of the limo. And I said on Twitter, his critics can't decide if he's a feeble old man who can't lift a glass of water or walk down a ramp, or if he's John McClane trying to commandeer the most, the most protected vehicle in the world. Pick one. I'm fine with it. Pick one and go with it.
Suddenly he's the Rock. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-founded company serving premium coffee to people who love America. They develop their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus learned as military members serving this great country of ours. Black Rifle Coffee imports high-quality coffee beans from Colombia and Brazil, and then they roast them 5 days a week here in America at their facilities in Manchester, Tennessee, and Salt Lake City, Utah. And that means you get the freshest coffee and the best no matter where you live. Enjoy the awesome packaging and the unique flavors like Silencer Smooth and Lava Panther and so many more. The best way to enjoy Black Rifle's freedom-filled coffee is with the Black Rifle Coffee Club. And when you join the club, not only do you get their cool mugs, which I love, but your brew of choice is roasted, packaged, and shipped free to your door on your schedule. You don't have to worry about running out ever again. A win-win scenario. Buy it at blackriflecoffee.com. Use the code MK at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. blackriflecoffee.com/MK. Use that code MK at checkout. Black Rifle Coffee, America's coffee. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.